Galactic Cruise Castaways by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Anniversary Gift. Chad Landau was halfway through reprogramming the lawn drone to stop trimming his neighbor's rose bushes when he saw Harold Putterman striding across the yard like he owned the moon. Behind him, Willena followed with her usual air of judgment, clutching a glossy envelope like it contained the cure for mediocrity. "Brace yourself," Chad muttered to Roxie, who was sunning herself with a book titled How to Politely Escape Conversations. "They're smiling," she said. "That's never a good sign." Harold reached the porch and extended the envelope with theatrical flair. "For you two. An early 5th anniversary gift." Chad took it warily. "What is it?" "Tickets," Willena said, her voice dripping with condescension. "To the Celestial Jubilee, the most luxurious galactic cruise ship Earth has ever launched." Roxie blinked. "Cruise tickets." "First class," Harold added. 15 days of interstellar bliss, gourmet meals, zero-gravity spas, and a rotating jazz nebula. Chad opened the envelope. 2 tickets. His name. Roxie's name. No sign of Harold or Willena. "This must have cost a fortune," Roxie said, suspicious. Harold waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't worry about that. We have connections." Willena leaned in. "We just thought you deserved something special. You know, considering your modest lifestyle." Chad felt his jaw tighten. "That's very generous." "Of course it is," Harold said. "We're generous people." Roxie forced a smile. "Well, thank you." Harold beamed. "Enjoy yourselves. You'll love the ship. It's practically a floating palace." Willena added, "Just try not to get lost. It's very big." They turned and walked away, satisfied. Chad closed the door and stared at the tickets. "This feels off." Roxie nodded. "But it's 2 tickets. Just us. No Puttermans." Chad grinned. "Then maybe this is the best gift they've ever given us." They were both wrong. Chapter 2. The Ship of Dreams. The Celestial Jubilee shimmered in orbit like a floating chandelier, sleek, opulent, and absurdly over-designed. Its hull was etched with constellations, its docking bay played orchestral fanfare, and its welcome hologram wore a tuxedo. Chad and Roxie stood at the spaceport's observation deck, mouths slightly agape. "I thought Harold was exaggerating," Chad said. "But this thing looks like it was built by billionaires with no taste and unlimited access to platinum." Roxie grinned. "I'm not complaining. I've never seen a cruise ship with its own nebula fountain. They boarded with ease, no lines, no fuss. Their suite was on the upper deck, complete with a gravity-adjustable bed, a minibar stocked with Martian mojitos, and a panoramic view of Saturn's rings." "This is ridiculous," Roxie said, flopping onto the bed. "I feel like we accidentally won the lottery." Chad opened the closet. "They even gave us formal wear. Yours sparkles. Mine glows in the dark." They were just settling in when a knock rattled the connecting door. Chad froze. "Wait. Why is there a connecting door?" Roxie sat up. "Maybe it's just a design thing. For families." The knock came again. Louder, rhythmic, familiar. Chad opened the door. Harold Putterman stood there, grinning like he'd just discovered fire. Willena was behind him, already judging the room's color palette. "Surprise," Harold said. "We're neighbors again." Roxie blinked. "You're on this cruise?" "Of course," Harold said. "We couldn't let you celebrate your anniversary alone." Willena stepped in uninvited. "We upgraded to the suite next door." Harold pulled some strings. Chad stared at them. "But the tickets you gave us were part of a 4-ticket prize package," Harold said proudly. First place in the Galactic Gourmet Dehydrated Food Contest. My Martian meatloaf surprise won by a landslide. We figured you'd want to come, Willena added. You're our best friends. Roxie's eye twitched. We are? Harold laughed. Of course. Who else would we want to spend 15 uninterrupted days with in deep space? Chad and Roxie exchanged a look, the kind of look that said we've made a terrible mistake. Harold clapped his hands. Dinner starts in 20 minutes. We'll meet you in the Stardust Ballroom. Don't be late. The door closed. Silence. Roxie collapsed onto the bed. We're trapped, Chad nodded. In luxury. With lunatics. Outside, the ship's engines hummed, the stars stretched, the cruise began, and so did the nightmare. Chapter 3. The Puttermans Strike Back. The Stardust Ballroom was a marvel of engineering and questionable taste. Chandeliers floated mid-air, rotating slowly like disco planets. A holographic jazz trio played smooth saxophone riffs while the buffet table stretched across 3 gravitational zones. Chad and Roxie arrived dressed to impress, he in a suit that shimmered like dark matter, she in a gown that sparkled with embedded stardust sequins. They were ready to mingle, sip exotic cocktails, and forget the existence of Harold and Willena Putterman. That dream lasted exactly 47 seconds. Chad! Roxie! Harold's voice boomed across the ballroom like a malfunctioning intercom. Heads turned. Roxie winced. Chad considered diving into the antimatter fondue fountain. The Puttermans approached, already mid-conversation with themselves. We were just telling the captain about you two, Harold said, slapping Chad on the back with enough force to realign his spine. Our best friends. Salt of the earth, or whatever planet we're orbiting. Willena leaned in to the nearest couple. We gave them their tickets, you know. They couldn't have afforded this trip otherwise. Roxie's jaw clenched. That's not. Oh, don't be embarrassed, Willena said. We're just generous like that. Harold turned to a waiter. Do you have anything named after Mars? My great-grandfather was one of the first colonists, you know. The waiter nodded politely and walked away, possibly to file a noise complaint. Chad and Roxie tried to escape to the observation deck. The Puttermans followed. They ducked into the zero-gravity lounge. The Puttermans floated in seconds later, Harold narrating his descent like a sports commentator. They attempted to hide in the ship's botanical garden. Willena arrived with a list of plants she found uninspired. By the end of the evening, Chad and Roxie were exhausted, humiliated, and somehow more socially radioactive than the ship's fusion core. They're everywhere, Roxie whispered as they collapsed onto their bed. Like glitter. Or space herpes. Chad stared at the ceiling. We need a plan. Outside, the stars twinkled. Inside, the Puttermans snored through the connecting wall. The cruise had only just begun. Chapter 4. Pod People. Chad stared at the ceiling of their suite, listening to Harold's muffled voice through the connecting wall. He was giving a dramatic retelling of his great-grandfather's Mars colonization. Again, Roxie lay beside him, eyes wide open, counting the seconds between Willena's passive-aggressive critiques of the ship's decor. I swear, Roxie whispered, if she says gaudy one more time, I'm going to eject myself into space. Chad sat up. That's it. What? We eject ourselves into space. Roxie blinked. I was joking. I'm not. I saw a life pod bay on Deck 7. They're roomy, stocked, and, most importantly, soundproof. Roxie considered it. You think they'd notice? Not if we sneak out during the sleep cycle. We'll be back before breakfast. Just a few hours of peace. That night, carrying a backpack of snacks, they tiptoed through the dim corridors of the Celestial Jubilee. The ship's AI greeted them cheerfully at every turn. "Good evening, Chad and Roxie Landau. Sleep cycle initiated. Would you like a lullaby?" "No," Chad whispered. "We'd like plausible deniability." They reached the life pod bay. Rows of sleek escape vessels lined the walls, each designed to hold 25 passengers in comfort and mild panic. Pod number 14 was unlocked. Inside, plush seating, ambient lighting, a mini kitchen, and a holographic fireplace. "This is nicer than our suite," Roxie said, settling into a recliner. Chad activated the entertainment console. "They've got movies." "Want to watch Nebula Love or The Accountant of Andromeda?" They toasted with rehydrated champagne and laughed for the first time in days. Then Roxie reached for a blanket and accidentally snagged a lever. A very large, very red lever. The pod shuddered. Lights flashed. A voice announced, "Emergency launch sequence initiated. Please remain seated. Or don't. It's too late." Chad lunged for the controls. "No, no, no!" The pod launched. G-forces slammed them into their seats. The stars outside blurred. The ship vanished behind them. Then everything went black. They awoke hours later, groggy and disoriented. The pod was tilted at an angle, half buried in tropical foliage. Sunlight filtered through alien trees. Strange birds chirped. Something purred. Chad groaned. "Did we die?" Roxie sat up. "If this is the afterlife, it's got great lighting." The pod's systems were fried, communications dead. Distress beacon shattered, navigation offline. They stepped outside. The air was warm and sweet. The ground was soft. Fruit trees swayed in the breeze. A small, furry creature waddled up to Roxie and curled around her ankle. Chad scanned the horizon. "We're stranded." Roxie picked up the creature. It purred louder. Chad sighed. "But we're stranded. Alone." Roxie smiled. "Best anniversary ever." They were both wrong. Again. Chapter 5. Paradise Miscalculated. Chad awoke to birdsong, or something like it. The sound was melodic, layered, and oddly harmonic, like a choir of wind chimes tuned to a jazz scale. Sunlight filtered through translucent leaves, casting soft patterns across the pod's interior. A small furry creature lay curled on his chest, purring like a contented engine. Roxie stirred beside him, her red hair tangled with petals. "I think I adopted half the forest last night." Outside, the jungle shimmered with impossible beauty. Vines glowed faintly in the shade. Fruit trees swayed in a breeze that smelled faintly of cinnamon and citrus. A stream nearby sparkled like liquid crystal, its babble punctuated by the occasional splash of a playful creature. They spent the morning exploring. Every step revealed something new: edible fruits that tasted like childhood memories, flowers that changed color when touched, and animals that approached without fear, as if humans were old friends. The pod's emergency scanner confirmed the impossible. The air was not just breathable, it was perfectly calibrated for human lungs. The water was pure, mineral-rich, and naturally chilled. The vegetation was safe, nutritious, and oddly tailored to human biology. The animals were friendly, emotionally responsive, and seemed to crave affection. "This place is almost too perfect," Chad said, examining a fruit that tasted like Roxie's favorite childhood dessert. Roxie nodded, stroking a creature that had curled into her lap. "It's like someone designed it for comfort, for healing." They built a camp beside the stream. Chad fashioned hammocks from vines and leaves that adjusted to body temperature. Roxie arranged stones into a fire pit that glowed with bioluminescent warmth. At night, they lay beneath constellations that felt familiar but subtly rearranged, like the universe had rewritten itself to be more poetic. Days passed, time lost meaning. They stopped counting hours and started counting moments. The way Roxie laughed when a creature mimicked her dance moves, the way Chad's eyes softened when he watched her sketch the landscape in the dirt. One evening they sat by the fire, surrounded by sleeping animals. Roxie cradled a purring creature in her lap. Chad handed her a carved fruit bowl filled with something that tasted like starlight and nostalgia. "This is the best anniversary we've ever had," Roxie said, her voice quiet, reverent. Chad nodded. "I think I'm falling in love with you all over again." She smiled. "I never stopped." They kissed beneath alien stars, wrapped in warmth, silence, and the kind of peace that felt mythic. The jungle hummed around them, as if the planet itself approved. They didn't speak of rescue anymore. They didn't need to. For the first time in years, they were truly alone, together. Chapter 6. The Return of the Menace. The fire crackled softly. Chad and Roxie sat shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in a blanket of woven vines and quiet joy. Around them, the jungle's creatures slumbered in a loose circle, furry, feathered, scaled, and serene. Roxie stroked a purring bundle in her lap, while Chad traced constellations in the sky with his finger. "I could live here," Roxie whispered. "No clocks, no noise, just you, me, and a planet that actually likes us." Chad smiled. "We haven't argued once." "That's either love or mild brain damage from the crash." She laughed. "I'll take both." They toasted with fruit nectar in carved shells. The stars above shimmered like they were listening. The moment felt mythic, like the universe had paused to let them breathe. Then the tree line exploded. Leaves flew, creatures scattered. Roxie's lap was suddenly empty. Harold Putterman stumbled into the clearing, his blazer torn and his enthusiasm intact. Willena followed, swatting at vines like they were beneath her. "There you are," Harold bellowed. "We've been looking all over for you." Chad blinked. "No." Willena sniffed. "You missed the buffet." "There's a chocolate fountain that defies gravity." Roxie stood slowly. How did you find us?" Harold pointed behind him. "There's a resort complex just over that ridge. Entertainment dome, spa, karaoke lounge. This whole planet's a port of call for the cruise line. Everything's artificial, even the animals." Willena added, "The decor is a bit rustic, but the drinks are bottomless." Chad looked around. The fruit trees, the perfect air, the affectionate creatures, the curated constellations. It was all a simulation. Roxie sat down hard. "We thought we were stranded." "You were," Harold said, "in the relaxation zone. It's designed to mimic a survival scenario with luxury undertones. Great for bonding." Willena smiled. "We've been so lonely without our best friends. No one else will even talk to us." "They're jealous that my great-grandfather was one of the first Mars colonists," Harold said. Chad and Roxie stared at them. The jungle was still beautiful, but the spell had broken. The Puttermans were back, and paradise had room service. Chapter 7. Buffet of Betrayal. The resort complex was everything Chad and Roxie feared. Neon-lit, overstaffed, and aggressively cheerful. A holographic greeter welcomed them with a voice that sounded like it had been trained on game show hosts and motivational speakers. "Welcome to Serenity Station, where every moment is catered, every meal is bottomless, and every guest is a star," Chad muttered. "I miss the jungle." Roxie nodded. "I miss the silence." Harold and Willena led the way, oblivious to the emotional whiplash they'd inflicted. Harold was already halfway through a story about his great-grandfather's Mars colonization, this time with added sound effects. Willena critiqued the buffet layout, the lighting, and the font choices on the dessert labels. "You simply can't use Comic Sans for creme brulee," she said, horrified. Chad and Roxie tried to slip away. They made it as far as the meditation dome before Harold found them. "There you are," he said, breathless. "We signed you up for couples karaoke." Roxie blinked. "You did what?" "It's tonight," Willena added. "You'll be singing Love in Low Orbit. It's a duet. Very challenging." Chad stared at the schedule. "You also signed us up for a couples massage, a trust fall workshop, and something called Galactic Intimacy Yoga." Harold beamed. "We thought it'd be fun," Roxie whispered. "I think I'd rather be stranded again." They endured the massage, awkward, oily, and narrated by a robot named Sven. The trust fall ended with Chad nearly concussed. The yoga class involved poses that defied physics and dignity. By the time karaoke rolled around, Chad and Roxie were emotionally drained and physically sore. They took the stage under duress, surrounded by blinking lights and a crowd of mildly interested passengers. Harold cheered. Willena filmed. The music started. Chad sang. Roxie harmonized. Something strange happened. They were good. Really good. The crowd leaned in, applauded, cheered. For a moment, the chaos faded. It was just them. Two voices, one song, and a shared rhythm that reminded them why they'd fallen in love in the first place. Then Harold jumped on stage with a tambourine, and the moment died. Chapter 8. Escape Plan Beta. Chad and Roxie sat in the Serenity Station's reflection dome, surrounded by holographic waterfalls and ambient whale sounds. A robot named Zenbot hovered nearby, offering them cucumber mist and unsolicited affirmations. "You are worthy of joy," Zenbot said. Chad muttered, "Not with Harold around." Roxie sipped her gravity-defying smoothie. "We need a plan." They'd survived couples karaoke, endured galactic intimacy yoga, and narrowly escaped a group therapy session titled Embracing Your Inner Nebula. The Puttermans were relentless. Harold had started narrating their every move like a documentary, and Willena had begun critiquing Roxie's hammock-weaving technique. "I miss the jungle," Roxie said. "Even the fake one." Chad leaned in. "We need to disappear, again, but smarter." They began brainstorming. Option A, bribe the ship's AI to reassign their cabin. Rejected. The AI had already labeled them Putterman adjacent and rerouted their room service to include Harold's favorite snacks. Option B, fake food poisoning. Rejected. Willena would just bring them herbal remedies and a lecture on gut flora. Option C, hide in the cargo bay. Promising, but risky. Last time someone tried that, they ended up in a zero-gravity laundry chute. Then Roxie had an idea. "The spa," she whispered. "There's a sensory deprivation chamber. No sound, no light, no Puttermans." Chad's eyes lit up. "We book it for 2 hours. Tell no one." They made the reservation under fake names. Zorgon and Velma. The spa attendant didn't blink. That evening, they slipped away during the Putterman's scheduled trivia hour. Topic: Harold's ancestors. The chamber was everything they'd hoped for. Quiet, dark, and blissfully empty. They floated in silence, wrapped in warm gel cocoons, listening to nothing. "I love you," Roxie whispered. "I love you more," Chad replied. Then the door opened. "Zorgon," Harold called. "Velma." Willena peeked in. "We thought you might want to join us for the midnight buffet." "They're serving inverted soufflés," Chad groaned. Roxie screamed into her gel cocoon. The Puttermans had found them. Again. Chapter 9. The Great Putterman Purge. By day 13 of the cruise, the Celestial Jubilee had become a floating pressure cooker, and Harold and Willena Putterman were the lid no one could pry off. Harold had cornered the ship's captain twice to retell his great-grandfather's Mars colonization saga, now with dramatic reenactments and a poorly timed harmonica solo. Willena had filed 17 formal complaints about the buffet's lack of narrative cohesion. Passengers were beginning to crack. In the Stardust Ballroom, a group of honeymooners staged a silent protest by wearing noise-canceling helmets and refusing eye contact. The ship's AI began rerouting Harold's voice through the ventilation system just to get it out of public spaces. Chad and Roxie, now known as the couple who brought the Puttermans, were treated like carriers of a social virus. "I think someone spit in my mojito," Chad whispered. Roxie nodded. "I saw a crew member bless herself when we walked by." Then came the turning point. During the cruise's mandatory Galactic mixer, Harold commandeered the stage to deliver a speech titled, "Why My Ancestors Matter More Than Yours." Willena passed out pamphlets detailing their generosity toward the less fortunate, featuring a photo of Chad and Roxie looking confused. A murmur spread through the crowd. Then a chant, "Putterman pause! Putterman pause!" It started with a group of retirees from Neptune's moon colonies. Then the honeymooners joined in. Even the AI began flashing passive-aggressive messages on the walls. "Consider silence. It's free." Harold tried to rally. "You're all just jealous of my legacy." Willena shouted, "We gave them tickets. They owe us." Chad stepped forward. "We didn't ask for them." We tried to say no. Roxie added, "We were hunted through a jungle by these people. We deserve asylum." The crowd erupted in applause. The captain, who had been hiding behind a holographic fern, emerged and made an announcement. "Effective immediately, the Puttermans will be reassigned to the ship's quiet deck. No karaoke, no speeches, no buffet commentary." Harold sputtered. "But I'm a descendant of someone who would have begged you to stop talking," the captain said. Willena gasped. "This is a violation of our social rights." The AI chimed in. "You are free to express yourselves, just not here." Chad and Roxie watched as the Puttermans were gently escorted away by a team of spa droids wielding scented towels and firm boundaries. Silence fell. Someone handed Chad a drink. Roxie leaned in. "We're free." Chad smiled. "For now." Chapter 10. The Gift That Keeps on Giving. The Celestial Jubilee docked at Earth's orbital port with all the pomp and holographic fanfare of a reality show finale. Passengers disembarked in waves, dragging luggage, souvenirs, and emotional baggage. Chad and Roxie stepped off the ship hand in hand, sun-kissed, slightly traumatized, and deeply bonded. "I feel like we survived something mythic," Roxie said. Chad nodded. "Like Odysseus. But with more karaoke." They passed through customs, where a board officer scanned their IDs and muttered, "Ah, the Putterman party." Chad winced. "We're not a party. We're hostages." Outside, Earth's gravity felt heavier than usual. The sky was familiar. The air was real. The silence, blessed. They arrived home to find their lawn drone had gone rogue and sculpted the hedges into abstract representations of despair. Chad made a note to reprogram it. Roxie unlocked the door. "I'm going to take a bath." "A real one, with water and no AI commentary." Chad nodded. "I'll burn our crew's outfits." Then he saw it. A package on the doorstep. Sleek, metallic, embossed with the Galactic Cruise Line logo. He picked it up, opened it. Inside, 2 tickets. First class. Destination, the Celestial Jubilee. 2 now with more Puttermans. A note was tucked between the tickets. We had such a wonderful time, thought we'd make it a tradition. See you next year, Harold and Willena. Chad stared at the note. Roxie returned, towel around her shoulders. What's that? Chad handed her the tickets. She read them, paused, then calmly walked to the fireplace and tossed them in. The flames crackled. Chad smiled. You know what this means? Roxie nodded. We're moving. Chapter 11. The Great Neighbor, Escape. Chad and Roxie sat at their kitchen table, staring at the charred remains of the cruise tickets in the fireplace. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, eerily so, the kind of quiet that usually preceded a Putterman pop-in. We need to disappear, Roxie said. Chad nodded. Not just socially, existentially. They brainstormed. Then they got to work. Chad created a fake moving company website, Galactic Relocation Services. We move you beyond the stars. Roxie printed brochures with phrases like, escape the gravitational pull of toxic neighbors, and now offering wormhole upgrades. They rented a storage pod and filled it with random household items, then parked it conspicuously in their driveway. Chad wore a jumpsuit and pretended to scan items with a quantum inventory wand, actually a repurposed curling iron. Willena spotted them first. Are you moving? She asked, suspicious. Roxie smiled sweetly. Yes, to the Epsilon Eridani system. Chad got a job terraforming moons. Harold appeared horrified. But what about next year's cruise? Chad sighed. We've decided to live off-planet full-time. No more buffets, no more karaoke, just silence and soil. Willena frowned. That sounds lonely. Roxie nodded. That's the point. They handed the Puttermans a farewell card that read, Thanks for the memories. We'll cherish them from light years away. The next morning, they drove the storage pod to a friend's garage, left their house dark and empty, and posted a For Sale, Intergalactic Buyers Only sign on the lawn. For 2 glorious weeks, the Puttermans left them alone. Chad and Roxie stayed in a rental across town, sipping cocktails and watching the stars. We faked a move to another galaxy, Chad said. Roxie clinked her glass. And it worked. They toasted. Then Roxie's phone buzzed, a message from Harold. Hope you're settling in on Epsilon Eridani. We just booked a cruise that stops there. See you soon. Chad stared at the screen. Roxie groaned. The Puttermans were coming. Again. Chapter 12. Final Transmission. Chad and Roxie sat in their rental's living room, surrounded by half-eaten takeout and a whiteboard covered in escape strategies. The Puttermans had booked a cruise to Epsilon Eridani. Their fabricated relocation had failed. It was time for something drastic. We need to make ourselves socially radioactive, Roxie said. Chad nodded. Something so awkward, so emotionally messy, they'll never invite us anywhere again. Roxie leaned forward. We fake a breakup. Chad blinked. You want to fake a breakup? For them? Yes. Public, dramatic, irreversible. They got to work. Step 1. Create a video. Roxie dimmed the lights. Chad set up the camera. They dressed in mismatched pajamas and smeared their faces with artificial tear gel. Step 2. Write the script. It had to be tragic, confusing, and just believable enough to make the Puttermans uncomfortable. We've grown apart, Roxie said into the camera, voice trembling. He wants to terraform moons. I want to raise sentient houseplants. She's too emotionally evolved, Chad added. I'm still processing Season 3 of Galactic Love Tribunal. They cried. They hugged. They threw soft objects. Roxie stormed out. Chad whispered, I'll always love you. in another timeline. Step 3. Post it. They uploaded the video to a private channel and sent the link to Harold and Willena with a note. We thought you should hear it from us. We won't be cruising this year, or ever. The response came within minutes. Oh dear, we're so sorry, we had no idea. Take all the time you need. We'll cancel the cruise. Let us know if you need anything. Chad and Roxie high-fived. Step 4. Go viral. Somehow the video leaked. Within days it had 2.3 million views. Comments ranged from, "This is the most poetic breakup I've ever seen," to, "I ship them harder now." A podcast invited them to talk about emotional resilience in spacefaring relationships. A cruise line offered them a free trip to reconnect. Harold sent another message. "We saw the video. We cried. We're here for you. Also, we rebooked the cruise, just in case you reconcile." Chad stared at the screen. Roxie sighed. "We faked a breakup and got more famous. And they still won't leave us alone." Chad poured a drink. "We need a new plan." Roxie nodded. "Or a new galaxy." Chapter 13. Epilogue. Anniversary Redux. 1 year later. The stars outside the observation deck of the Celestial Jubilee, 3, now with fewer surprises, shimmered like they'd been hand-placed by a benevolent universe. Chad and Roxie stood side by side, wrapped in matching thermal cloaks, and the kind of silence that only comes after surviving something truly ridiculous. The ship's AI greeted them with a voice that sounded like velvet and boundaries. "Welcome aboard. Your cabin has no connecting doors. Your itinerary includes 0 karaoke. Your privacy is sacred." Roxie exhaled. "I could cry." Chad smiled. "I already did. Twice. Once during check-in. Once when I saw the words, Putterman Free Zone." They walked slowly to their suite, savoring every step. No Harold, no Willena, no unsolicited trivia about Martian ancestry, just polished floors, ambient lighting, and the distant hum of a ship that respected silence. Their cabin was a minimalist dream, clean lines, soft textures, and a view of a nebula that pulsed like a living painting. The minibar was stocked with drinks that didn't come with commentary. The bed didn't vibrate unless asked. The walls didn't talk. They unpacked in quiet joy. Roxie hung up her stardust gown. Chad placed a small carved fruit bowl on the table, a relic from their jungle days. It still smelled faintly of cinnamon and rebellion. Later that night, they sat on their private balcony, sipping cocktails made from ingredients they didn't have to identify aloud. The stars above stretched across the void like a promise. The ship glided through space with the grace of a story finally told. "I think we earned this," Roxie said, her voice soft. Chad nodded. "We survived the Puttermans. Twice. Technically 3 times if you count the karaoke ambush." She leaned on his shoulder. "Do you think they'll find us?" Chad looked out at the stars. "If they do, we launch the pod first." They laughed, toasted, and watched the galaxy unfold. Below them, Earth was a distant memory. The jungle planet, a curated paradise, felt like a dream. The fake breakup video had gone viral, spawning fan edits and a short-lived animated series. The cruise line had offered them a lifetime pass. They declined. This trip was their own. No cameras, no drama, just them. Together, and finally alone. Until Roxie's communicator buzzed. She groaned. "If this is Harold, I swear I'll eject myself." Chad checked the screen. Message from unknown. Subject, Galactic Reunion Cruise, featuring special guests, Harold and Willena Putterman. "We're hosting a panel on interstellar generosity and ancestral pride. Hope to see you there." Chad stared at the message. Roxie took a long sip of her drink. Then she stood, walked calmly to the balcony's edge, and tossed the communicator into space. They watched it spiral into the void. Chad raised his glass. To peace. Roxie clinked hers. To distance. The stars twinkled. The ship sailed on. And somewhere, in a distant quadrant, the Puttermans were probably rehearsing a duet. But for now, Chad and Roxie were free, and that was enough. Just as Chad and Roxie began to relax into their Putterman-free cruise, a message pinged from Earth. Update from your old neighborhood. The Landau house has been sold. They opened the attachment. A photo loaded. Two smiling faces in front of their former home. The man wore a blazer embroidered with constellations and a sash that read, "Descendant of Captain Thaddeus Vanderpelt, the legendary pilot of the first Mars colonist ship." His wife stood beside him, holding a clipboard and a color wheel. "We're thrilled to carry on the legacy of interplanetary excellence," the message read. "As new custodians of the block, we're proposing a homeowners association to ensure aesthetic harmony. First order of business, mandatory repainting of all homes in Martian sandstone. Harvey's great-grandfather was the pilot on the first Mars colonist ship, you know." Chad stared at the screen. Roxie whispered, "We didn't escape. We just leveled up." The stars outside twinkled. The universe laughed. And somewhere, the Puttermans were probably booking a cruise without the Vanderpelts. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.